Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today we'll be speaking with a 25-year-old athlete who started her first prep in 2019 before being stopped by the craziness of 2020. But she stayed committed, and as soon as she could hop into the gym and go for her show, she did, I believe, now I could be wrong on this, but 3 amateur shows and 2 pro qualifiers, going from 5th at Team Universe to 1st at Junior Nationals to win her pro card. Really excited for the conversation we're about to have. Like, guys, even before I hit record, we were going off. It's been really fun already. So welcome to the show, Becca Flachner. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. Now, did I get that right? How many shows did you do before your 2 national shows?
So I did like a mix. So my first season, I only did 2 amateur shows, and then going into my second season, I did 2 amateur shows into Universe, and then my third season, I did 3 amateur shows going into Junior Nats.
Okay, so it was 3 amateur seasons, and then you did. Okay, got it. Well, let's talk about that more after we hear if you have a ritual or something you do or think about right before your heel hits the stage.
So I don't have like a specific song that I listen to or like a ritual per se. I have like a routine, like a whole morning routine that I kind of set myself up for. So I do my own makeup for every single show. My first 2 shows, my best friend actually did it, but then I realized like how much I really enjoyed it and how much it calmed me. So like in the morning, I make sure I have time for everything that's obviously important before we compete, but I make sure I set aside like an hour, hour and a half to like sit, relax, and do like my whole face and my hair. And it really calms me. It's very therapeutic. But when I finally get backstage, my coach always orders us to like lay down flat. So I make sure to have like a cozy blanket. I lay down and I like just close my eyes. And it's not even that I'm really thinking about anything specific. It's just me calming myself and just making sure that I'm like relaxed and comfortable, like not chatty, not up and running around to like try to talk to people, but like really like just having a calm atmosphere for myself to like prepare to get on stage because I tend to get super anxious. But I just try to set myself up for success by having everything ready, not forgetting things, not rushing, but like doing everything I can to just relax.
Yeah, I love that. And what is the purpose of laying down backstage for those who don't know about like not being on their feet?
So you want to make sure that you're laying down. I'm pretty sure it's a water retention thing and just it's affecting your physique, like running around, using all of your energy. Because I don't, not a lot of people have experienced being like extremely, like I touched under 10%. I think I was like 7% body fat at my last show. So it's not like I had the energy to even really do anything anyway.
Yeah.
But it's just conserving energy and making sure that we're not like pretty much anything can affect your physique at that point. Like you're so sensitive. Um but I'm an athlete that I just follow orders. I do what I'm told, and I honestly prefer to lay down and not do anything when I'm backstage. So
Totally. Yeah, it feels good. Like you said, you just kind of get in the zone.
Mhm.
So you had done these 3 amateur seasons before going on to win your pro card. What was your feedback along the way, and what do you feel ultimately set you apart at junior nationals?
So I'll talk about my feedback in this last season, it was actually a very big struggle to get feedback because every single show that I did was a pro-am. So I wasn't able to stay after like the amateur show to like get feedback in person. So I was kind of relying on email, but the first and only feedback I got this entire season was from Sandy after my first show, Clash, here in Florida. And she told me basically that my entire physique at that show was perfect, but that I needed to be a little bit leaner and my glutes needed to be a little bit more full. But then I went into another pro-am in South Florida and then another pro-am in I think it was South Carolina. And I just wasn't able to get that feedback that I was looking for. But I was kind of honing in on Sandy's like overall feedback from that first show in beginning of May, and just making sure that I was completely dialed going into show after show. Obviously with my coaches, you know, I had their guidance and everything. But she's kind of like her word and like her feedback is kind of like the end all, almost like the end all be all, I would feel like, for bikini. So I was kind of like, okay, like as long as I come in tight, I come in with my glutes full, I keep my presentation, I keep my stage look and my stage presence, like I feel like I'll be great.
And you made so much progress between shows, like progress that a lot of people would probably argue isn't possible, or at least it's hard to believe when you see that visually. So what were you working on to deliver on that, or maybe what variables did you change?
So I think that's a really, really common misconception that you can't progress from show to show. And this might be something that isn't like said very often, but that's actually like a coach to athlete like problem. Like if you're not an athlete that can progress from show to show, that's something that your coach is either doing wrong or you're not doing wrong, right? If that makes sense. So like for me, I'm like, for me, when I'm on prep, like there is literally no option going into a show. If I'm not different or improved, I won't do that show. Like I won't compete again unless I'm improved. So like when I'm like completely saturated into a season, like there is no there's no like faltering on anything on my plan. No skipping cardio, no skipping workouts, no cheating on my diet, nothing. Like I've never done anything but follow my plan 100%. And I think that's something that like is proven by looking at my stage shots. But I also give myself ample time between shows. I think there was at least 3 to 4 weeks between each show. But after each show weekend, my coach always like, okay, like this is what we need, this is what we're going to do. Jumping right back in. They usually give me like, okay, you can have a meal tonight and maybe breakfast the next morning, and then 100% back on plan after that. And then we get right in. So I guess what I do differently is not so crazy. It's just following my plan 100%.
Isn't it amazing? It's a simple solution, is like do what you gotta do.
Yes. And obviously, like, depending on what the feedback is. So, for example, like Sandy's feedback was fuller glutes. So we added in a lot more like glute work. And let's say like somebody has, you know, a little bit more fat storage in their hamstrings or like in their core, they just need to be a little bit tighter. Like different types of cardio will be added in, different types of exercises will be added in. Like that's kind of what I mean by like, it's either your coach is doing something wrong or you're doing something wrong. So like your coach needs to be able to understand like what feedback means and what to do in order to like fulfill that.
Yeah, that's the coach's job, right? And then it's our job to execute. And are you coached by your boyfriend?
So I was, but now I'm still on the same team. And it's kind of interesting because like our team is like a few coaches. It's our head coach Clay, which I'm coached by him now. But we kind of get coached by, so it's Phil, Clay, and Sarah. Clay Parker and Sarah Parker. They're we're team unmatched here in Orlando. And if you get coached by one, you get coached by everyone, I feel like. So we have like a team of coaches. I was primarily coached by him, but now I'm coached by Clay. And they're like like we're family. Like Clay and Sarah, I always joke with them because I tell them like they're my parents.
Aw.
Yeah, it's honestly like the best because every show here in Orlando, like everyone on the team always shows up. We all support each other. We all go to team dinner. We all go to like before finals, we all go to lunch together. Like we all are very saturated in each other's lives, and I think that really makes a difference when you're competing for such a long time.
Absolutely. And like you hear it all the time that this is an individual sport, but if you want to go far, stay engaged with the community, whether it's a team or not, it doesn't matter, but being engaged with a community in this sport makes such a big difference because you
Oh my
get
goodness, absolutely.
perspective, right?
Absolutely. Like even in my off season, like I loved going to shows when I can. Like I love being a spectator. I love going in, like talking to judges. Like I like being on a first name basis with judges, not because of like anything like motive wise, but just because I love being in this sport and like being recognized. And like obviously it has its perks to like make yourself familiar with certain people and all of that stuff. But something I always told myself, like starting is like, I never ever want to play political cards. And like
Yeah.
maybe that will be something that like I have to reassess in the in the IFBB Pro. Like I'm not sure, like I haven't really gotten my feet wet yet because I haven't debuted yet. But I never want to like, I always want to be 100% me and be seen for that and not for something else.
I think that when you are involved and you know people and you connect and you stay connected in the industry, I actually think there's a higher standard too, to some degree, because you're representing on a maybe a bigger level as well.
Yes. So it's just a new learning curve like that I'll have to experience. And I feel like I just went on a tangent off of something completely different,
Oh my God, no, I love a tangent.
but but going back is it's very important to stay like involved with the community, especially when you're as passionate as I am about this sport. Like I help teammates pose, like I that's something like a new passion for me is like helping other girls pose and making sure they're the most comfortable that they can be on like a first stage experience, or even if it's like their fifth or sixth. Like I like being like a backstage like show mom.
That's so fun. Are you a coach as well?
So I coach lifestyle. I haven't gotten into like athlete coaching yet. It's something I definitely want to do in the future. Um, but I love helping with like helping other women through like my own experiences because I feel like I'm a well-seasoned athlete at this point. I've been through the brink of it all. So like any way I can like talk someone through any kind of jitters or any kind of confusion, like I like to make myself available. Um, and so I find a lot of fulfillment in that.
Love that. How do
Yeah.
you think that that involvement and that community actually influences your journey as an athlete or your perspective on yourself as an athlete?
So I feel like I have a lot of answers to that. So
Yeah.
forgive me if this is a long answer, but um so it's kind of like going back to that cliche. It's like when you're teaching, you can also learn through your own teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not like saying like I'm in any position to like teach because I'm like so like wise or whatever, like but like I'm teaching through my experience. So like I like being able to do that. Um and I totally just lost my train of
Yeah, how it
thought.
influences you as an athlete and you're teaching and you're learning because of that.
Yes. So ask me that question one more time. The
Yeah.
original.
Yeah. So
With
how does
the
working
ADHD, you're definitely experiencing my ADHD right now.
we welcome it.
Absolutely.
How does working with other competitors and staying involved support your journey or maybe influence how you see yourself as an athlete?
Okay. I remember my original point. So in teaching other athletes and helping them learn, it helps me to like kind of remind myself of what I need to like remember and like stay true to the things that I'm like talking about and teaching, because I feel like as you compete, things become so normal that you almost forget to go back to your roots, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So like in helping other women, I'm able to kind of remind myself of a lot of things that I could have forgotten. And it's like, even if it's like something small, like teaching a girl their first stage presence, like how the diagonal works, how like their first experience teaching them with their routine, little rules like that, little things like that, like just reminding yourself by teaching, like it's very helpful in improving your own like journey, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does make sense. Actually, like that's kind of how I felt when I was coaching volleyball years and years ago. It was like in coaching them on the basics, I remember I would then go to practice and I'd be like, oh, it really can be just simplified. Like there's a reason the foundational principles are foundational, and that applies with bodybuilding too.
Yes, it really does, because like bodybuilding at its core, it's all very simple things that are made very difficult because of us being human.
Mm-hmm.
So like the simple act of like going on the stairmaster for 20 minutes, that's something that's very easy, but we make it difficult because of all the limiting beliefs that we have inside. So like I'm very blessed, I'm very healthy, I'm very lucky to have legs that work, to have arms that work, to have no injuries. So like the simple idea of like I have a 6 to 7 day split with 6 days of cardio. The only thing that's telling me it's difficult is myself, but the simple act of it is easy.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, yes. It's perspective.
Yes.
Because and the same thing goes with food. People be like, oh, I'm so hungry. Coach dropped my macros. It's like, by how much? Oh, like 10 grams of carbs. Okay, a rice cake. Like, it's we
Right.
blow things up. We make it seem worse than it is because we're fixated on like the changes or what's happening, and we're forming these really deep associations between like what we're doing and our physical changes as well. And it becomes emotional because we also care so much. It's not just the stairmaster. It's like, if I don't do this, it could ruin my
Yes.
chances. Just like you said, and I'm the exact same way. I've never faltered on my plan. I always followed through. So to people like us and a lot of people in this industry who are type A, it's like, well, if I don't follow through on this, it's an emotional thing. It's like
Oh my goodness. I can't even tell you how much that resonates with me. Because and the people that are close to me can like they'll laugh when they hear this, but I'm always told that I'm so hard on myself to a fault. But whenever I'm hard on myself to a fault like that, it means that whatever it is, it's very, very important to me and I'm very serious about it. So it's
mm,
the best answer for somebody that's like struggling and with their motivation to like follow through is that the only way to follow through is to consistently follow through. And that's the only way that you can finally like arrive to the destination of being dedicated, is being consistent.
yes. And this is the time, and this is a sport where we can actually test our thresholds. Where if we remove the judgment from testing and experimenting, because in a science experiment, there shouldn't be bias, right? So if we can
Right.
look at ourselves the same way, we might say, oh, if I like expect this, and this for myself, and then you do that or you try to do that for 3 weeks, but you keep falling short. Well, now you probably realize you're expecting too much. That doesn't make you a bad person, a bad athlete, insufficient, none of that. You just need to build up more efficacy and more ability so then you can follow through in the future. The thing that sets apart the person who's a champion, and at least I believe, in general, because someone with actual competency is going to have confidence. The difference between confidence and arrogance is competency. So if you don't allow yourself to learn and you don't allow yourself to implement and experiment, you are going to create a situation or an environment where you become more arrogant rather than actually competent and therefore actually confident.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's something too, is like, I don't ever, so I'm still digesting just the simple fact that I am a professional athlete now. Like,
Yeah.
it's not something, not because I don't feel like I'm deserving of it, but because it's just such a huge honor, in my opinion. Like, it's something that I worked so hard for. But like, I can't, like, becoming a pro, like, I think, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I lost my thought again. Um, what were you saying right before I just messed that up?
Developing competence and confidence.
Oh, okay. So what I always told myself always is that no matter what, I always want to be available and to learn. Like, I always want to be teachable and coachable no matter what. No matter how seasoned I am, no matter how much experience I have, like 10 years down the line, I could be, you know, hypothetically speaking, I could be the best athlete in the world in 10, 15 years, or maybe even 5 years. But I never want to be in a position where I am not accepting like the ability to learn ever, because I'm only holding myself back from improving even more if I do so. So like, whenever there's like a new competitor and they're struggling, that's probably one of the best pieces of advice I can provide, is to always be coachable and willing to learn, because there's never a shortage of things that you can learn. And like, there is, it's just endless. Like, there's things that I'm learning every single day to help myself improve, not only as a competitor but as like a coach for even like just my lifestyle clients. But if you stunt that and you think that, like, the moment you consider yourself the best is when you stop being, like, you stop yourself from the capability of being the best, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. That's exactly right. Well, because being the best assumes that you're perfect, and there's no such thing. And expecting perfection in any realm of life or any endeavor is actually an admittance or a submission to failure, I believe.
Exactly. And the minute that you start pursuing perfection in bodybuilding is when the line gets blurred from it's being fun to not being fun anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I really love about you, and I think we have this in common, it's the love for the process and overcoming obstacles or facing struggles head on with gratitude and excitement to give more. So, what are some of the daily disciplines you have, or maybe the mindset shifts or even mantras you utilize to support your efforts every day, even when things are hard?
So I have a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something, and it's not even like a specific time or whatever, but it's a headspace that I have at the beginning of prep where I kind of mentally prepare, and I'm kind of like, okay, Becca, like, in the next couple of weeks, you're going to start suffering. So you better start mentally preparing for the fact that you'll be hungry, you'll be tired, you're not going to want to like do, normal things. So let's start preparing now while we do have energy and we are in a healthy mind space, that in the next few weeks, next few months, it's not going to feel like that anymore. And so I find that, like, when I mentally prepare for the suffering, when the suffering finally happens, I'm not surprised. I'm not like immobilized. I'm well prepared for it, and it's not a surprise. So that's something that is super, super important for like me. But it's also like with friends and family, it's also very important to like have that conversation too, not with just yourself, like in your head that, I need to mentally prepare for the future suffering that I'm going to have. But it's also important to share that with your friends and family too, to prepare them to not be surprised when you're kind of holding yourself back from that. those like relationships.
That is so awesome. I love that you just said that. I totally agree. And I really appreciate how you just mentioned communicating that with others, because I think other people in our life don't always know what to expect either. And if we can ease some of their concerns or anxieties and lay it out for them, like based on past experiences, this has happened. This is how I'm planning to handle it this season. Here's how you can support me. We're giving them a roadmap, and we're giving ourselves and them boundaries too.
Yes. And that's something I'm currently working on, is like communicating to the best of my ability, learning how I receive it, how I give it. That's all like, that's like basically the baseline of like my therapy sessions right now. And so like I always pair things with bodybuilding because it's literally my whole life.
Yeah.
And not in an unhealthy way, because I feel like there's so much conversation about not making bodybuilding your whole life, but it's literally the one thing that I'm most passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason, or I guess how I feel about it, is why I'm here and how I even achieved the honor of being an IFBB Pro. But it's important to like really, really learn self-awareness if you're going to be in this sport and you want a future in this sport. It's so, so, so important to like know yourself, know how your brain works, know how to communicate with yourself, but also like the people that are most important to you.
Absolutely. Well, what's the point of being conscious of yourself or aware of yourself if not for the impact it has on others?
Well, absolutely. But it's also like, when I talk about self-awareness too, it's like when you get deep into prep, like I kind of make an analogy, like, because I've had moments where I am battling, like it feels like I'm battling two people, like my true self and like my prep self, but it's two people at once fighting each other. And like my true self is saying like, I'm so hungry, I'm so tired, like I need this, I need this, I need this. And then my prep self is like you're being a little bitch, excuse my French. But it's like two people, like when you, I call it like the dark place, when you're deep into prep, like you approach the dark place because the brain fog hits, the fatigue hits, like the tiredness hits, the moodiness hits. And it really does feel like it's two people battling each other, and it's the two people is you. And it's really important that you have the self-awareness and you learn that self-awareness to kind of make sure that those two people are balanced, because it can be very, very easy to kind of lose yourself in a prep. And I've approached that before, where I felt like I was losing like my true self, because it was easier to kind of surrender to that other, part of it, where it's easier to like give in to the fatigue and the tiredness and the hungriness, the hunger. I hope that makes sense, because it's when you are experiencing it, it doesn't make sense. And the only way to make it make sense is to have as much self-awareness as possible.
Absolutely. It's actually it reminds me a lot of the dialectics that is behind like dialectical behavioral therapy. Because like it makes me think of how we have this idea that might oppose another idea, but dialectics allows us to say like these things can coexist. Like you can be tired, hungry, wanting to give in at the same time as being motivated, excited, grateful, and both have truth to them. When you try to over identify maybe with one side versus the other, that can bring up a lot of challenges, like validating yourself, etc., etc. But if we could find that middle ground, like that synthesis of you acknowledge the thesis, you acknowledge the antithesis. I can never say this word, antithesis, but however it's actually meant to be said. And then
I know, I don't either, I don't know.
Someone listening is probably like, I'm done listening to this episode. But you find like that middle ground, which can be hard for competitors because we can be very black or white thinking, all or nothing thinking, but it's the dialectics, it's the honoring of both, it's the yin and the yang, it's the balance. And I really like how you brought up some of the suffering and and accepting and preparing for suffering. And this is something that's actually come up a few times in my DMs to bring up on the podcast. So I'm glad that you did, because I think an important conversation to have is, what can a competitor be prepared to experience? And what do you think is normal compared to what is too much?
Okay. So be prepared to not poop. I'm just kidding. Like, no,
But she's not kidding. Like, be prepared to want to so badly that you'll like wait to do, like you'll like fixate on it.
oh my God, no, that's so funny. Like I'll have texts from like other competitors because I prepped with a couple friends like this past season, and we'll literally have conversations like, "Oh my God, I finally pooped."
Yeah, go get that citrate, baby.
Oh my gosh, no, seriously. But on a, for real, like there are a lot of things that, like, since I'm a seasoned competitor, like I know, like the more you compete, the better you are at like being prepared. So like I guess this is a conversation for like new competitors.
Yeah, or even, I mean, there may be
Okay.
seasoned competitors who don't know what too much is, because you also get in that groove of like, I'm just gonna do whatever and anything, but sometimes that's not good either. So I'm curious, like, what you think is too much,
Too
if
much.
anything.
So that's a tough one because like I'm the type of competitor that like I'm all in. Like once that switch is flipped, like I'm all in, and I behave very selfishly, like with my time and with my efforts and where my energy goes. But it's again like preparing yourself and others for that selfishness. But what is too much? I think that when you're approaching, like, something that I need to remind myself is that bodybuilding is not, even though it feels like my whole world, it is not my whole world. So making sure to, even when you have no energy, because you're not going to have any energy, and that's something to like really expect. And it's hard to explain to new competitors. Like an example is like preparing for an amateur show versus preparing for a national show, like a pro qualifier. They're two different types of shows, and it's two different types of experiences that you're going to be prepared for by your coach. So when you're preparing for a national show, and whenever I meet a competitor that's never gone to like a pro qualifying event, I always tell them like prepare to go to a dark place to get on stage. And like I guess the best way to explain that is explaining like my personal experience going into junior nats, if that doesn't go too far off on a tangent.
Let's hear it.
So going into junior nats, I had experience going into a dark place last year going into Team Universe, simply because I had to get very, very lean. But the level of lean that I was going into junior nationals was something I'd never experienced. And I was so, so lean that I had kind of come to terms with how hungry I was. But because of the, mentally preparing at the beginning of season, like I knew that this was going to be feelings that I was going to feel. But going into junior nationals, I'd never experienced the level of hunger that I did. And it was actually the first time I was almost giving into my mind telling me to stop, because I think I was at a point where my body was telling me to stop. And it was something that I really, really struggled with, because I always told myself, okay, like if my head starts to get like this or my body starts to get like this, like I need to stop. And obviously, like things went my way that weekend. Like everything went perfectly. Like I got my pro card, but I had actually a lot of feelings of guilt because of how I was feeling like in the weeks prior to getting my pro card. So like I was in this dark place feeling like I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't looking good. There was just a lot of hormonal things I was like battling, especially after, and I know we kind of like touched on this before, but like I had gotten, or I stopped my birth control, and there was just a lot of hormonal things like was battling with that, but they had stripped me down like to nothing. Like I was very lean, and when you're getting to that point, like there's really nothing that anyone can prepare you for with words or advice or anything until you just are there and you're experiencing it. But I was, for lack of a better term, I was not okay going into junior nats. Um, and ultimately you can kind of see that in like the video where I am told and it's announced that I got my pro card and that I'm an IFBB pro because I'm just so shocked on stage.
Shocked.
Like, I don't know if you watched it, but like I get comments all the time like you didn't even like I don't even think you processed it. Like I don't even think you're like fully there. Like, and to be honest with you, like I wasn't really able to process it because I wasn't able to really process my mind in the weeks going into it. Like it was so weird. I was in like this weird like limbo because of how stripped down that I was. And there was talk of like, oh, if things don't go your way at this show, we're going to go to Team Universe, which was 2 weeks after Junior Nationals. And something that I was like really battling is like, if things don't go my way at this show, like I'm done. Like I have to be done because I had reached that threshold where like I had to be done or I wasn't going to be okay.
Yeah, the threshold.
Yes. And I think that that's something that's super important for competitors that haven't reached that area yet, is recognizing that threshold, but not allowing it to, I say threshold, but maybe let's call it a boundary because that might be easier to like
Conceptualize.
but making sure that you set a boundary and not disrespecting it. And so like a boundary that I always wrote for myself in my head was that if things get like that, I have to stop. And so I was right at that threshold that weekend, and obviously everything turned out perfectly. Obviously, like I got my pro card, that's what we came for, but I would have had to respect my boundary by dropping out of prep if I didn't get my pro card that weekend and my coach was like, let's go to Universe. I would have had to say no.
Yeah.
So I think that's
that you were like, what was it that you were saying was your boundary? Like, what were those hard and fast? Like, now it's gone too far where after this show, I won't let it continue.
So I was just in a mental space and physical state where like everything, like I felt unwell. Like I was so lean, I was so hungry, I felt unstable. And like that wasn't like I don't hold that over my coach, I don't hold that over myself. I just hold it over like the fact of like we needed to get to a certain point. I was willing to get to that point, and I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy I was healthy to do it, but it doesn't make it fun. And so I was at a point where like walking around was uncomfortable, like sitting was uncomfortable, like I was so hungry that pretty much every single minute of every day I was just thinking about how I was hungry.
Yeah.
Because I was pretty much stripped down to like trace carbs. Like I wasn't like carved up for this show. I was pretty much walked in as is for junior nats. And so it was just really hard. Like I remember we had an Airbnb that was 3 stories, and my knees and my feet hurt so bad. I remember my calves being so tight that I could barely walk. Like it was just I was at a point where I was like I need to like this needs to be over because I was approaching my 7th month of prep and I was just like I think my body is at its limit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really important and that kind of answers your too much question is like when does it become too much? You will know because your body will get to a point where like you just can't. And that weekend I approached that, and I'm really happy that it turned out the way I wanted it to, because that's like another story, but like that whole weekend everything was perfect. Like there was no mess ups, there was no like problems, no obstacles that weekend other than just like battling my own mind and my own thoughts. And
Mhm.
there was a lot of pep talks from Clay, from Phil, like from Sarah, like you look amazing, you look the best you've ever looked, and you just need to like remember that. You need to be confident, you need to get out of your head, and the work is done. So just try to relax, calm down, and like let's get this show on the road, and whatever happens happens.
Mm.
I make it sound so serious, but it really does feel that way when you are in that dark place. Like it feels like a cinematic like experience.
Totally. I'm really glad that you're sharing this as well, like how it actually was, like being in the trenches of that, because you also don't always know how far you're gonna have to take it until you
Yes.
get there.
And like what scares me is like I'm really willing to like do whatever it takes. I'm like very intense.
Mm-hmm.
So like if my coach tells me to do something, like I'm going to do it. Like if I am told like I have to face like near death for this, like that's what scares me because like I'm willing.
Yeah.
Like and I don't and it maybe it's because I'm so passionate about it and I really do just love this sport so much. But like after experiencing junior nats, like I know 100% that I can handle anything because I handled that. And that's also something that, like, I guess that's one of my reasons for being so passionate about it because it really shows you how much you can handle and how much you can do. And then, expanding on that, like looking into other aspects of life, like if I could handle that weekend, I can literally handle any kind of weekend, any kind of like pain, struggle, obstacle, like because I handled that, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So
100%. It's like when you break your own limits, and they're painful limits to break usually, you learn more about yourself, you develop a new layer to your character, and some people will look at that and say crazy, this is unhealthy. Similarly though, you got to do this for any area of life that you're trying to improve or grow in: finances, business, relationships. It's not always going to be comfortable, and I think there are probably limits health wise, but then again, like you wouldn't know if you didn't take yourself there, like how you were feeling, and then you ultimately were rewarded with your pro card, which then reinforces that it's worth the suffering, which can be like a positive reinforcement of negative behavior as well, which is also kind of
yes, I
scary
know. That's why
because
I said it was scary because like I'm really willing to go as far as it takes.
yeah.
And so like I guess as a seasoned competitor, I can take my own advice and make sure that I'm learning to respect my own thresholds and boundaries because I'm so willing, that can also be unhealthy. Like
Yeah.
I need to know, and continue to know, obviously going into IFBB Pro, like I'm going to be pushed further. So I'm going to need to lean on, my coach and the people close to me to make sure that I'm respecting my own boundaries and not pushing myself past new thresholds because there will be new thresholds.
Yeah. It's like if you were, I don't know, like if you're communicating with someone and you have this boundary and then you continuously cross your own boundary just because you're prone to people pleasing, let's say. That doesn't mean that's a good thing. So similarly, like in this, like yeah, you might be willing to die for it, but no one wants to see that happen.
Right. Right.
I mean, you get right on the verge and then you have like these incredible championship moments, at least, in many times in our life, what right when we're breaking, we're actually on the verge of something really amazing.
Right. And so I think that's why, like, looking back now, like, it was so hard for me to digest it. Like, I was so in shock because to be honest with you, I didn't think I was deserving of going pro that weekend because of my mindset, because I was so hard on myself. I had like I envisioned in my head that, like, okay, when I go pro, like, I'm going to know that I'm ready and deserving of it. But it did
Mhm.
not feel that way. And so it took me a long time to digest that I've achieved this goal because of the mindset I had going into it, that I want to make sure I learn from that experience and build up like the mental fortitude for my future, because I know that I'm going to hit that dark place again, and I want to make sure I'm ready and that I don't bring myself down in order to get or try to get to a goal, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It almost is like a modification of your expectation as well. Like, okay, in the past, I expected that in order to feel worthy of my pro card, I had to have this like Cinderella moment of like, it's my time.
Right.
So now it's like, if you're going into your pro career, and I know your goal is to make it to the Olympia one day, if you tell yourself, oh, I'm only worthy of that if I feel XYZ way, it's like, well, a feeling's not always predictable, because it's
Right.
usually the result of experiences.
Right. And so like going pro was something that I almost manifested to a fault, because like when I tell you I thought about it every single morning, every single night, every single time I had like there was any free space in the last 3 years, in my mind I was thinking about going pro. Like, and I
What
can
was
say that with
your
100% certainty.
what was driving that? Like, why?
I When I hit my first season, I knew that this was something that was so important to me, and I think it goes back to my childhood, and this is like, I guess this is super deep. Like this is super deep, so get prepared.
Let's go.
But like I grew up having feelings of always needing to prove myself. I always needed to be proving myself that I was worthy, all of that. Going into bodybuilding, like, and this is advice I give, but like going into bodybuilding needs to be a choice that you make for yourself and not needing to prove yourself. And when I started bodybuilding and like I was good at it and I was winning and I was doing well, I didn't feel like I had to prove myself to anybody because I was proving myself to myself. Like I was doing it. Like, and that feeling, like it's unlike anything I've ever felt before, because all my life I was proving myself to others, but this is the one time like I was proving myself to myself. Like I said I was going to do something and I did it, and I did it well. And that's like a feeling that you can't really get anywhere else, unless it's like, obviously you can get it elsewhere, like if you're achieving like a different type of goal or you're different achieving like a different type of passion, but like proving yourself to yourself, like the cliche, like it's you versus you, like that is something that is like irreplaceable and it's priceless to me, because living, growing up the way I grew up, like having to prove myself constantly to others, and like having this experience where like I was able to do this solely by myself and prove that I was able to do something so great like by myself, like that is why I'm so passionate about this, because like it literally makes you feel like you're on top of the world. Like, so ever since my first season and seeing that I was like as good as I was at it, like I was like, I never want this feeling to go away. Like I want to continue it. I want to continue it, and I want to continue it. And it obviously feeds my competitive nature. Like I'm very competitive, but just the simple fact of like me saying I'm going to do something is really serious. So if I say I'm going to do something, like I do it 100%. And I definitely think I just quoted like a popular reel, and I did not mean to do that.
Oh my God, I don't even know. To me, it just sounded really insightful, and I love that.
No, it just came I've been like scrolling through like so many reels recently. Like, and I'm pretty sure that's like one of the trending ones right now, and I want to
You're like, I speak in reels now.
I do. I speak in reels.
Have you seen that meme where it's like when you're walking around the house and you're just like think like all the audios are going through your head like at random, like you can't like turn on the sink without thinking of a reel,
Oh
or
my gosh, yes.
dude, we're
That's
all
me.
addicted. It's a problem. But I want to go back to something you said. It resonated with me because I've always had this weird like ick when people say they're doing it to prove others wrong. I'm always like, ew. And I understand and I hope I'm probably offending many people,
Oh, that's
but yeah, yeah, whatever. It doesn't mean I don't think you'll be successful. I just don't think it's necessarily the best driving force, because at the end of the day, the best validation is the validation we get from us. So sure, maybe you'll prove some people wrong, and sure, maybe there's people who doubt you, and that's cool. You'll prove them wrong, but is that what it's really about? And what you said that resonated is like, you got that feeling, like you knew what it felt like to really make yourself proud. And you said this really separated you from what you existed in as a child, which is always having to prove yourself. Were you and you don't have to answer this, but like, did you have a lot of siblings, or was it like your parents weren't very available?
So I actually have four siblings. But it was actually from like a parental like standpoint where like I lived it's hard to explain because it's something I'm still like learning and healing from, but like my family dynamic was very unhealthy. Without getting into like too much detail,
Yeah.
it was just like a when you're living in a family dynamic that I lived in, and forgive me if this sounds confusing because it's still something I'm like learning and working on,
Mm-hmm.
but I I was what they call like a peacemaker in the family,
Yep.
where like what I was doing was making sure I was keeping the peace between everybody because it was a very like triggering and like unhealthy family dynamic. So like my role that I took as a kid was peacemaker, making sure everyone was not arguing, making sure everyone was okay. Um and this is I guess the feelings of like having to prove myself and prove my worth was like there was a lot of like emotional distance and like no communication, and it was just a lot of like it was all very muddy. And so not only did I have feelings of needing to prove myself emotionally, but proving myself in like different things in life, like striving so hard to like be successful or like proving myself in like other ways because there were so many of us as kids too. So like there was not really any attention from like parents because it's kind of impossible when you have five, like when there's five children in the family. But um having those feelings of like needing to prove yourself to others and not yourself, that can consume your life. And it did consume my life for a very long time, honestly, until I started bodybuilding. And so I don't know if any of that made sense.
Oh, well, it definitely
But
makes sense. Yeah. No, I 100%. And also, like, with my, honestly, like, with my background in clinical mental health counseling, like, you're really speaking my language. So I do get it. And for like people who maybe aren't following, it's basically in your family, you take on a role. And in a dysfunctional family, you really take on a role that then tends to present and follow you into your adulthood. And you're still processing this, at least from what you're sharing. What I'm gathering is you're still processing this, but you come to
yes.
realize that it was being reflected in your life as an adult. And when you found bodybuilding, you really started to maybe develop more of a secure attachment with yourself and who you are, and learn to set boundaries, or learn that you don't always have to be the peacemaker because your priority became you.
Yes. Thanks for explaining that so well because I did not I was not able to explain that very well. But
I thought you did a beautiful job.
when you're healing like that inner child and stuff, like that is a very like long journey. So like in learning all of like what your childhood made you to be, like that is just a long journey. So like and it's not something I'm just started. It's been like years, and I expect it to take much longer. But I wasn't expect like that is it's very confusing to talk about. It's something that like a lot of people I hope are pursuing, but when you finally pursue it, it can be very confusing to like process and like talk about and like put into words.
Yeah. It almost like I feel like it pursues us, you know?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like I had no choice because like once you pursue self-awareness, like it kind of starts to pursue you because you get down a rabbit hole of it and it's a healthy rabbit hole, but you are down it and you can't stop falling until you get to the destination of like true self-awareness.
Yeah, so true. Oh my God. And if you don't face it, you just avoid it and avoid it, those patterns, like they get more
Yes.
intense and
And those cycles that we find ourselves in.
mm-hmm. Oh God, yes. I love this conversation so much. Like I want to release the episode like right now. Just like being totally honest with how I feel. I'm just like, this is so cool.
Well, I'm happy to talk about my experiences too. Like I've always told myself I'm an open book if people ask me questions. Cause like I've been told I'm a very like private person, but I'm really not. I open myself up to people that ask. I don't just open myself up.
Totally. I hear that.
No. Yeah.
No.
Otherwise I just you in my own business all the time.
You're like, otherwise I'm sorting through all this. I'm in the file cabinets of my mind.
Yeah. It makes me think of that episode of SpongeBob where he's like in his own head.
Yes. Oh my God, I love you. You're so amazing. I love a SpongeBob reference. The fact that
Oh
you
my
just did
God.
that, I knew exactly. Oh man. And he's like, yeah, they're like yelling at each other too.
I know. That's literally what my head looks like, especially when I'm going through like my severe ADHD spouts.
Let's talk about that. I'm glad you just said that because that's what I was gonna segue into. So you just made that really easy for me. How do you feel ADHD impacts your preps and your improvement seasons?
So this is something so important for myself that I had to like learn because for those that have experienced like being I keep on like referencing like what I call like the dark place, and pretty much anytime I say dark place, it's really like when you're close to show, you're super lean, you are super hungry, you're super tired, and you're battling like your mind. So like during the time where I approach like the dark place, that's when like the brain fog hits. And so if you've ever experienced brain fog on prep, it's basically like your body isn't functioning normally. And so especially for women, like when our fats get super low, it starts to like affect our brain function. And so like for me, brain fog looks like, forgetting pretty much everything. For example, like walking into a room to go get something, but you're just standing in the room because you're like, what the heck was I coming in here for? And that's the feeling that you get a lot when you hit brain fog on prep. But when I'm on prep into that point and I'm battling brain fog, but I'm also battling my severe ADHD, things can become very frustrating because obviously if there's people listening that have ADHD, like you understand like how that can affect your life. And it's something I'm still learning now. But the best way to handle it on prep is for me routine and sticking to my routine 100% and not like veering off, because any kind of let's say I veer off of my routine, I feel like I can't do anything properly for the rest of the day because of my ADHD. So it's kind of like, I guess, a little bit of like obsessive compulsive disorder too, with how structured my routine needs to be. Because if it's not, then my ADHD will be affected and my brain fog from prep mixed with my ADHD I will be having a horrible time. Like it's very confusing to try and explain the experience because it's so confusing. But when you have severe ADHD, let's take prep out of it for a second. When you have severe ADHD, obviously it's not just like the redundant like explanation of like not being able to focus, but you can have feelings of like being paralyzed where like you sit down to do something, you can't focus, and then for like the next 5 hours you're literally not doing anything, and you could have been doing the thing that you wanted to sit and focus on, but you can't because you're unable to focus. And so it's like feelings like that mixed with prep brain fog, it can be very dangerous territory if you're not structured with a routine and sticking to it 100%. Because if you're not sticking to your routine, you can start skipping cardio, you can start, adding little things here and there to your diet. You can be doing little things that you're not supposed to be doing because you're unable to focus, and then you start veering off. So for me, being 100% consistent, it's never been an option because of what I struggle with. Because if I'm not 100% consistent with what I do and I'm not structured, like I won't be able to do what I do.
Yeah. And for like, just to take that a step further with some psychoeducation for listeners as well, but it's like when you have ADHD, your internal control is like it functions differently. So having external control through a structured schedule provides a lot of the motivation or the follow through or the path. It is literally a structure that wouldn't exist otherwise, or would be difficult to have otherwise. So it's like whenever I would work with people with ADHD, the first thing we do is talk about routine, because you need it. And
oh
then
my gosh, I need it so badly. It's it's like it almost seems like a daily medication, almost like my daily medication is making sure I stay on track. Because if I'm not on track, like my mind will not be on track.
absolutely. And then like when you're experiencing the demands of that alone, like you said, when you take prep out of it, like you can already get fatigued when those things are challenged, but then like you add something like prep where you're probably not getting all the nourishment you need. You're demanding a lot physically. Yes, it's great because you have that structure, and that structure is even more extreme and elevated, but you can still experience something like what you said, like where you went hours without being able to do anything. It's almost like it's, I don't know if this is the right word, but I guess, yeah, it's kind of like analysis paralysis. People have heard that term before, maybe, but you get into this zone where like you can't do anything else. Your brain is exhausted and literally like it's like it can't process anything else.
No. And it's very, and like the only way to like explain it is paralyzing, because like your brain is so far in overdrive focusing on what you needed to do, and then there's guilt because you can't do what you needed to do and wanted to get done, and then it's just really foggy area to like be in. But battling that with brain fog, like there are conversations I've had with others that I'm sure they're so frustrated because I literally have moments where I have to close my eyes in order to even think clearly enough to form sentences. Like, and that's so frustrating because not only is it, you know, what I experienced with ADHD, but like it's something you can't control because of like the diet and the exercise and like what you're putting your body through. So it does get worse. So like the only real way to like alleviate that is making sure that you're sticking to your routine, but also making sure that you're using your time and allotting it properly to like what you need. Like being 100% selfish on prep is so important, and it's a huge commitment. And that's why like when someone new comes to me like, oh, like I'm thinking about competing, like I just always make sure to stress that it's a huge commitment, it's a huge mental commitment, and like you have to be willing to be selfish, because like even if you don't have ADHD, you're still going to approach the brain fog, and you're still going to have to like know how to confront that and how to handle it. And it's not forever. Like brain fog doesn't come and it stays. Like it does go away when you're off season and like you're able to be fed properly, fed up into your reverse, and like getting proper rest and all of that. But I guess honestly, like the closest thing I can tell Like the closest thing I can compare to like experiencing ADHD is experiencing brain fog on prep. Like it's very similar feelings. It's just obviously a lot less like it's a lot less extreme.
Yes. And I love putting things in context with like contrast.
Mhm.
So like if you have, and this goes even if you don't, but if you're someone who's like dealing with ADHD, you're probably going to try to micromanage or deeply analyze everything, because the opposite would be impulsivity, and you're trying to like almost treat that and not
Yes.
have that. So naturally you go to the other end of the spectrum, which is okay, you have to micromanage and microanalyze everything.
I hyperfixate on a lot of things. And like that's actually something I learned with too is like certain symptoms of like ADHD is like hyperfixating on certain things. And so like I'm someone who hyperfixates on food, and not in an unhealthy way where like I'm like super food focused, but like I'm able to eat the same meals every day for months at a time, and I don't need to change them because my mind is focused on the simple fact that I'm eating in routine, and those same meals are routine.
So I'm gonna take this as an opportunity to say what an important moment for listeners to see that not just can every experience and every competitor be different, but these experiences and these approaches can be influenced by things that you otherwise don't see or know about within the competitor. So someone might look at you and be like, I don't know how she does it. She's so disciplined, or she's always eating the same things, blah blah blah. What they maybe didn't know or didn't see is that like there's other reasons for it.
Right.
And similarly, your perspective on prep or competing could also be influenced by that too. So it's like people fall into comparison, and I should be more like Becca, I should be more like Celeste. It's like, well, there's reasons Celeste and Becca are the way they are. I'm not saying me and you are the same. Just in perspective, they might identify with certain things, but it's like we have to look at ourselves and say like, well, what is the best approach for me? What is realistic for me? What is sustainable for me? What is beneficial for me? So like, yeah, like sharing the perspective on this podcast is awesome. And I think what you just said opens the door for people to go, knowing what I've been through and what I experienced, maybe what I struggle with from a mental perspective or a developmental point of view or a life point of view or relationships. How might this apply or be applied to my approach to prep?
Right, exactly. And like I don't want to take away like the discipline that I've built and put it all on like my experience with ADHD, but it's helped me build because I've had to use it to build, if that makes sense. So like in order
Yeah.
for me, in order for me to be successful on prep, you know, battling this, I have to have that structured routine no matter what, because it's basically like my daily medication to make sure that my headspace is healthy. But now it's a habit because I've done it for so long that I'm able to build up the discipline so that even when I'm having days where like it's really bad, I'm still doing it. That's when I know that not only is it like my daily medication to make sure that, you know, I'm structured mentally, but I've built up that discipline to make sure that even if I've built up the discipline to like no matter what headspace I'm in. So like I had a reason at the beginning and it was a mental reason, but now it's become like a lifestyle, if that makes I feel like I danced around that a little bit. But again, you guys are experiencing what it's like to have ADHD when you're trying to get to a point. But
Well, I love what you said about like, we're not chalking up everything that you do to this. That's definitely not true.
right, right.
You've been able to develop so much discipline and so much self-respect, and you've clearly had so many internal shifts and breakthroughs as well.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, and that's obviously a result of experiences, but beyond experiences, it's actually you taking the time to gain insight from those experiences, which requires like being willing to go into the darkness, not to be
Yes.
confused with the darkness of prep, but the darkness in general, and
Yes.
know that there's value in that. So I was actually hoping you might share some of the challenges you have faced through this journey that you maybe haven't shared yet that you feel have contributed to your success or your outlook on all of this?
So, ooh, that's a tough one. It's not a tough one because there's a lot, but it's a tough one because that's like deep. But
Yeah.
um, so I've definitely I so after junior nationals, I think I approached like one of the darkest times of my life. Um, without getting into too much detail, like my relationship ended and it just kind of stirred me into a point of feeling completely lost. Like I did not know who I was. I wasn't okay mentally. I was struggling with a lot of anxiety. And the one thing that was keeping me okay was sticking to my plan and remembering what my ultimate goal was, which was, competing as a pro and being a successful competitor. And like routine, like I can't stress enough how impactful it is when you feel like you've hit like a rock bottom. And like I definitely felt like I had hit that because I was just approaching, like I was experiencing a lot of confusion about myself, with the anxiety I was feeling, with the, I'm just gonna call it like, because I don't feel like I had hit like complete rock bottom because I'm able to kind of like look at the grand scheme of things, and like I'm a big picture thinker. So I don't feel like I hit rock bottom, but I had feelings of what that might feel like if I did. And like routine was the only thing that was keeping my head above water. I was like, okay, like I am not okay. I don't feel mentally okay, but what makes me feel okay? And it's, getting adequate rest, getting my water intake, getting my meals done, going to work, getting my work done. I had to literally like have like a checklist of things that I 100% had to do in order to feel okay and keep my mind off of things.
Mhm.
Um and like I feel like everything circles back because like when people ask me like, oh, like why is this so important to you? It's not the simple thing of like bodybuilding being so important to me. It's not, lifting weights every day. Like it's what all of it brings as a whole. And like going through the dark time that I went through, and I'm still like recovering from it. I feel like I know myself better than I ever have in my life just by going through this dark time. But like I can't even I can't even put it into words because I feel like it's a lot.
Mhm.
But the only thing that has ever made me feel like I do like this is like the most passionate have been about anything. Like, and I feel like that's why I'm so successful at it, is that no matter what, this will always be here, and I can trust in that, and I can have that, and like even through the dark times, like it's there, and it's what makes me feel good. But like taking that, taking bodybuilding out of it, because obviously like I can't put my whole life on it. Like I could get injured and then, that's that. But let's hope that doesn't happen. But let's say, bodybuilding, I retire as an athlete. What stays is my drive to be healthy, my drive to have that routine, my drive to have structure, that drive to like be as healthy as possible. And like that drive is what gave me like the power to keep my head above water after this time. And I feel like it's so hard to put into words, so I feel like I'm dancing around a lot of different points because it's such a rocky like topic. But like going through these types of things, like you really are able to hone in on like who you are as a person and what's important. And it's really important to like, and I think I wrote about this on my Instagram actually, but I was listening to a podcast and I ended up like writing a whole caption about it, and I'm thinking about it now, but it was basically talking about how like with solitude, the in solitude the answers lie. I think it's something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So like I took this time to like be completely alone, not really hang out with friends, like not really do anything but stay in this structured like headspace doing everything that I needed to do. And like that really like shifted my whole mindset and it really fixed my focus on like what's important and like what I really want out of this life, and like taking time to be alone but like completely alone, it can feel very very scary, but like boy have I like experienced some crazy shit, excuse my French, but like just being able to like confront, and it's kind of like cliche, but like being able to like completely confront your demons and like face them, like I've never felt as mentally strong as I do right now. And like I guess that kind of answers that. I hope that kind of answers.
That was beautiful. I got this image of like a warrior knowing there's a dragon in the cave, and they could either choose to walk away from the cave, or they can go in there and slay the dragon, and it sounds like you're slaying your dragons.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I sound so intense. I'm actually I'm a generally happy person. But like I am like a true like I'm very internally emotional
Yeah.
and intense. Like I'm a true Scorpio. Like I don't know if you follow like astrology or anything, but like I'm a true Scorpio, and so like sometimes my intensity can like be intimidating for not only myself but others. And like I not that I try to hold back my intensity, because I honestly couldn't even if I tried, but I understand that when I talk to people it can seem like I'm super intense, but I promise I'm not. I'm like I'm fun
Girl,
to be with, I promise.
you ain't gotta explain yourself to me. I hear you on that for sure. I think when you open up the deep conversations, or we have things like this, or you're being very raw, you're being vulnerable, you're sharing this perspective, maybe it can elicit this feeling or this thought, but like you're just this very like you're always like this. But of course, like I mean, there's been goofy moments here as well, and like silly lightheartedness, but I think like that intensity is so cool. It's a great part of you and who you are. And I think the way you express yourself and what you've been through is actually really palpable and insightful. And I have a feeling others would agree with me when I say that.
I hope so. I hope a lot of what I said made sense, because I feel like it didn't, but I'm hoping it did.
Well, even if it doesn't make sense, like I think everyone makes sense of everything their own way anyway. So whatever you are trying to say is probably not even going to be fully comprehensible. Like we talked about before we hit record, no one truly knows. You no
Right,
matter how much you express, no one will ever know other than
right,
yourself.
right.
Look at us. That was a full circle moment.
It was.
That was so cute. Um, okay, so I'm gonna shift gears a little bit because that was really beautiful and awesome. And I think it's important to, and I know we've been talking for a while, but I'm loving this. And I think there's more to be shared. And I want to go to you coming off of birth control.
Okay.
So, what influenced that decision, and what are some things you would recommend other competitors to be mindful of when considering that?
So this is like a whole thing, so prepare yourself. I'm just kidding. Um,
Buckle up.
so I so when I turned 18, I got an IUD, and I had the Mirena IUD. And I didn't actually have any problems with that birth control at all. And then right after quarantine ended, was about the time that the 5 years had hit for like my IUD to be removed and replaced. And so after quarantine, obviously, I had to wait till like the doctors opened and everything, and I had to find a new doctor. So I found a new doctor, and she suggested the Kylina IUD, which is it's a smaller option. Because she said because of my body type, I'm very small. So she said the Mirena was a little bit too big, and it actually got like lodged in to me, and I had to have like an outpatient procedure to like have them remove it. And it was like a whole thing, and it's like a whole gory story, but not to scare anybody, because I believe IUDs are great for like very specific people with specific needs, especially if you don't have the side effects that I had. So definitely do your research if you're gonna like get into birth control. But for me, I had a very, very bad experience with the Kylina IUD, but I didn't see the effects of it until about a year after. Um, so, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe it just needs time to like adjust to your body or what, but and maybe prep is what like started the different symptoms, because you're obviously like hormones are at play and everything. But um it wasn't until this last year that I started noticing like extremely bad, like pretty much every symptom you can think of, like fatigue, depression, like waves of anxiety, completely like zero sex drive, kind of feelings of complacency, and that probably goes into like like a ways of a depression from it. But I thought it was me. And so I obviously was in therapy at this time too. So I was like trying to like talk with my therapist about all of these feelings, and we had no idea what was going on, because he was like, you're not depressed, but like I don't understand, like we neither of us could understand why I was feeling this way. And so we then went, I talked to my therapist about like the sex drive thing and like all of these things, and he directed me towards like endocrinologist, and like it was just a lot, and we couldn't understand what was going on. And there was just a disconnect because I had no issues with the Mirena. I assumed I wouldn't have had issues with the Kylina either. And so it wasn't until I started this prep that I started noticing that the symptoms were really like taking over, because my body had a really hard time getting lean. I was holding a lot of water. Going into Clash, my first show of the season, I looked the most watery on stage I've ever looked. And it was really like disconcerting, because like I am always a competitor that shows up like 100% and feeling confident. And so that was like one of the first shows that I did not feel confident going on stage. I thought that I looked good, but I didn't feel ready. But once I commit to a show, like I commit. And so I was like, it's the first show of the season. Like I'm not supposed to be 100% until junior nationals. So like, let's just see what happens. Maybe I'll like pull it together for this show. And it's not like I did bad. I got second place, but it's not the placing that got to me. It's the feeling of like how I felt I looked. And I just knew that like whenever I put 100% into a prep, my body shows that, and it didn't show that this time. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the doctor. I don't think everything's good. And so she ended up putting me on like a medication that ultimately did absolutely nothing. And so our final decision together was that we would remove the IUD. And so shortly after Clash, I removed it. And that same week on prep, I dropped 5 pounds of water, which was like mind blowing to me, because I was like, how is this happening? And then following that, I was put on like a couple different supplements to like help my body regulate after being on hormonal birth control for like 7 years. And I going into Florida Grand Prix here in Florida, and then we did Palmetto in South Carolina. My body was finally responding, and I was like, that same week that I had dropped the 5 pounds of water, like I had feelings of like almost like euphoria, but it wasn't euphoria. It was just like high energy levels, like feeling very energetic and like getting restful sleep, and like almost like I had removed like something evil inside. And I know that sounds dramatic, but that's how it felt. Like I felt like I had removed something from my body that it was fighting for so long. And like the moment I removed it, like my whole body felt like good. Like it's so confusing to like explain. Like, but ever since removing it, like my like during season 2, like my headspace was really good. Obviously before approaching like the dark place and everything, but even in the off season, like my sex drive is normal. My levels of like, you know, like the waves that I was having of like anxiety and depression, those have gone away besides like other limiting, you know, the things that I just talked about. But like removing that variable that was causing those things, like I can't stress enough, like if you are feeling different symptoms like this and you have any type of birth control, definitely like my advice would be to do your research about that type of birth control. And like I know this sounds so funny, like, but I couldn't find any information anywhere online about the Kylina except for when I searched it on Reddit. And so it was actually Phil and I, we went on Reddit and we were searching up like women's experiences with IUDs and specifically the Kylina. And that was the only way we could find any information about my specific IUD, because if you Google it, you cannot find anything, which I also find super sketchy.
So people are maybe, I won't get into it, but
right.
like protecting from that information being known.
Right. And so that's why, and I feel like that's also part of the reason why I never thought that that was the issue, because I couldn't find anything online. And I know it's not good to Google like symptoms and stuff, but I was at like a point where I felt powerless because I wasn't sure what was going on with my body and why I was feeling a certain way. And since I couldn't find anything about my birth control, I ruled it out. And then it's so funny to me that I go on Reddit and I find all these articles. It was like a thread of like 30 different experiences from like different women talking about having exactly the same symptoms I was having. And it was literally one of the best moments of my life because I was so relieved.
Wow.
And so I got it removed immediately. And then my body was like in full recovery mode, almost like it was like jumping for joy that I had removed like the worst thing ever.
Oh my gosh. How amazing is that?
It was because I feel like I was able to get to the point I was able to get at this season because I had removed it. Like I was able to feel healthy. I was able to perform at the best of my capabilities because there wasn't anything holding me back. And like now I feel very anti-birth control because I'm never going to put something into my body that's going to mess with my hormones because I'm paying for it now. I feel like my body is still trying to get back to that point where I'm able to have like a full period, and like I'm very inconsistent, and like obviously doing the things that I can now to make sure I'm healthy, I'm eating properly, I'm taking proper supplementation, and like all the things that I can handle and control I'm doing. But it's just like a time game now, getting my body back to where it needs to be and getting blood work done and like all of that. But it definitely impacted the beginning of my season because I wasn't able to get to a certain point because my body was like not having it.
Well, it's great that you were able to experiment, right? And like take that time to really learn what was going on with your body and then go through that process of removal, and now you're in this state of feeling better because of it. And sometimes I think we forget that a lot of what we experience psychologically could actually be coming from something physiological. Just like when we have not a huge deficit of calories, it's natural to fixate on food because your mind's built to fixate on what's missing. So
right,
you have to be mindful of biological factors, and it sounds like that's something you were able to do.
Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how excited I was to see the scale finally move because I was stagnant in weight for like every single week I was not dropping. Like I would kind of slowly drop. And then as soon as I got it removed, it was like a very deep drop. And I was like, holy crap, am I gonna finally be able to like reap the benefits of like my hard work? Because it felt like I wasn't. Like something out, like an outlier was like controlling my entire prep.
Yeah. Well, it was.
Yeah. But it was nice to have like an actual answer for it. And I felt so relieved because I was like, am I not working hard enough?
Oh yeah, of
Because
course.
that's the feeling I had. I was like on stage and seeing my stage shots, I was like, did I not work hard enough? Because I'm the type of person that I'm so intense on prep. Like I do everything 100%. So I was like, is my 100% not good enough? Like, do I have to do 120% now? Like, is that where we are? And I had this like internal like battle. And so after getting that removed, I was like, oh my God, thank goodness. Because if I have to do more, because I was at a point where I was like, if I have to do more, like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you sharing that experience and sharing like your views on it as well. I think that another thing I wanted to ask about that I regret not asking is, and it's totally random and not related to this, but it's waist training. And I think that's something that there's a lot of controversy around. And since we just talked about something somewhat controversial, I'd like to hear like why you believe in it and why you use it.
Okay, so I love waist training. um, so to put into perspective, I didn't seriously start waist training until last season. So I guess my second season of bodybuilding. Um, I okay, so ultimately in bodybuilding, like bringing the criteria for bikini is having that perfect X shape. And so when you're bringing in proportion and all of that, like, and we're talking about like criteria and like what you need, like you need to have like nice round delts, tiny waist, not huge glutes, but like big full glutes to bring proportion to the overall X shape. And like obviously the important part of the X is the middle where the waist is small. And so I never struggled per se with like a small waist. Like I've always been very petite. I'm 5'2", I'm short, like I'm a petite person, but core is something I always struggled with. And I didn't start seriously waist training until last season. And last season I think my waist on stage was like 23 and a half, 24 inches, but I brought it down to 22 this season.
That's awesome.
And I don't want to like say like, oh, waist training is like the reason why, but like, um, I don't see it being any other reason because like I seriously waist train. Like I think I waist train like 6 to 8 hours every single day. Now I'm not telling people to like jump in like that because you won't be able to. Like you have to like get into it like smoothly, like short first, like a couple hours every other day, stuff like that. Like it's not something to like jump into, like putting it on super tight and like wearing it 6 to 8 hours every single day, like at the beginning. Like you have to kind of slowly get into it. But it also helps with like being able to breathe through your chest, which is super important on stage when you're trying to keep tight.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm explaining waist training to people, like it's not necessarily just for the benefit of bringing your waist down and making it smaller, but it's also helping you breathe differently because when you're waist training, you can't take a deep, full breath through your belly. Like you have to learn how to breathe through your chest. And that's super important when you're on stage and you're posing because you can't take full breaths through your belly because then you've blown out and you're not tight. So you have to be able to learn how to breathe through your chest to get air in so you don't suffocate on stage when you're posing. And so I think it's like just a little trick that I benefited from. And like I'm not here to say like it's the end all be all and like everyone's wrong and whatever, but through my experience, like I really enjoy it and I've reaped the benefits of it. So like I'm all for it. I definitely recommend it. I obviously brought my waist down, like, but besides that, it helps keep your core tight throughout the day. And a little secret is, and I don't know if this is healthy or not, but because it's tight, when I'm wearing it on like, you know, closer to shows where I'm like super, super hungry, I do find that it helps with my hunger. Um, and it helps me to feel fuller when I do eat.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like I don't know if it was a movie or a show or something where they were like, "Oh, I always wear tight clothing to holiday meals to keep myself from
Oh
eating."
my God. Yes, I've heard of this. I
Yeah,
don't
like
know.
I don't know what that was. But maybe it's just a perpetuated belief us women have been taught about whatever. But yeah, I think it's weird. We say like, I don't know if this is healthy, but it's like, what is, like at this point.
I
Like,
know, because like I tell people when they start prep, like I'm like, just remember, this isn't a healthy sport, okay? Like there are very healthy aspects of bodybuilding, but like getting down to the nitty gritty, it is not healthy.
yeah, I mean, and like you want to achieve something extreme, you probably have to go to extreme, and you can mitigate risk and you can mitigate response to risk through mental work and physical proactivity for sure. So you can we want to be honest with people and say it's not always the healthiest thing, but also, if you take responsibility and you accept that it's not, then you are opening yourself up to get ahead of it and take a healthier approach.
Right. It's
Amazing.
mhm.
I really like your perspective on everything, and I'm so glad that we talked about so much. I just feel like there's so much we could talk about, and we could probably talk forever. So let me ask you like one more question before I get into the best advice that you have, although you've given lots of great advice. Um, what are you focusing on now?
So I'm focusing on so much, but I guess ultimately I'm focusing on me and like bettering myself every single day. And like, I guess what that looks like for myself is, um, I have a lot of like short-term goals, long-term goals, like overall like life goals, but like my overall goal like as a competitor is to compete successfully in the IFBB Pro. So like what that looks like is like shifting my mindset from like what an off season as an amateur looks like and an off season as a pro looks like. And so I had off seasons where, you know, I've rebounded a little bit too hard, like I've enjoyed food a little bit too much. And like something I'm proud of is I've never held any guilt over myself for that.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely have like days where like body image wasn't the best, but like I never got to a point because I never allowed myself to get to a point where like I have disordered eating or I have extreme guilt for enjoying food. Um,
Good.
and like I've definitely had off seasons where I've overindulged and I'm happy I wasn't able to like get into that unhealthy mindset. But like the mindset shift now is that I'm a pro and I need to act like it because I do feel like it's an honor and it's not something so like surface level to me. It's very deep for me. So like I want to respect that by like living it. So like I'm on plan, I'm getting my water intake, I'm training like my life depends on it. Which is like kind of what my coach had told me. He was like, you're on plan, you're doing everything you need to do. Now literally just train like your life depends on it. And like that was a check-in we had like a couple months ago, but I've never forgot it because it's something that I tell myself every day before I go into the gym. Okay, Beck, you're literally gonna train like your life depends on it, and you're not gonna walk out of this gym until you've achieved that. And so that's kind of my goal right now is like what can I do right now to make sure that I have a successful first season as an IFBB pro because I don't have the expectation of, you know, stepping on stage and like getting first place. Like I'm obviously very realistic, but I at least can control how successful I am by doing the things that I need to do now in the off season. So as a competitor, that's what I'm doing right now is like following my plan, doing what I need to do, but making sure that I'm giving it my all and that no stones are left unturned. Because it is, I can't stress enough how important it is to me that when I step on stage for my pro debut, I don't want to feel like I could have worked harder. And I never want to have that feeling. And especially as a pro, because I worked as hard as I did for the last 3 years to achieve this. And so now I want to basically like live respecting it, like do the things that I need to do to respect it. So as a competitor, that's what I'm focusing on. As me, Becca, outside of bodybuilding, I'm focusing on building my cookie business. What I guess I didn't really talk too much about that, but
Yeah,
through
we didn't
bodybuilding,
talk about that. Oh my
I
God, why
know.
didn't I even put that in the intro?
So I own a new, it's like my own like little startup company, and I call it Baked by Becs.
So cute.
And it's something outside of bodybuilding that I'm super, super passionate about. But before my life, like how it looks like right now, like I actually wanted to be a pastry chef, but I just never like my life didn't lead into that direction. So like I always had like a super, super passionate drive to like bake and cook and feed people. And I don't know if it's like my Italian nature, but like, I've always had like a creative energy to like create and bake and like just all of what that entails. And like it wasn't until my first season where like you know how it goes, like you see all the different like cookie companies and desserts and treat companies, and pretty much everybody knows what I'm talking about. Like you go online and you order like 10 cookies, whatever, and you pop them in the freezer until your show comes up. But I'm going to be honest with you, I looked on all of those sites and I didn't see anything that like sparked my interest. Not, like kicking down those companies because there's a lot of great companies, but like I didn't see anything that like really sparked my interest. But my thought was like I could do that. Like I could make my own and I could make it exactly how I want it to be, and I know I'll be happy with it because I made it.
Yeah.
And I kind of made it like a little project for myself. So like going into, I think it was my second show, like I started like experimenting, and I wasn't really struggling too much with cravings. Like it was my first season. Like I was so serious about it. It was my first experience like being a competitor. So like I had no like struggle like baking or whatever and like not wanting to eat it or whatever. Of course I would like had the desire for it, but I like didn't have the desire to like veer off. So I was like baking my little heart out, and I made like a few creations here and there, but ultimately like a lot of my teammates had tried them and they had all urged me to like bake more and like sell them, and it wasn't something like I was super interested in because it was like I'm just doing this for fun, like I'm not really trying to like get into like the business of it. But after like a few people in my life were like really urging me to do it and I was so passionate about it, I kind of was like, okay, like why not? And so like in the last year, um I've actually had like a lot of success with it. And so like something I'm doing recently is like I'm actually like doing vendor booths at like different shows here in Orlando.
Nice.
Um, which has been so fun because it's also another way for me to like still saturate myself in the lifestyle outside of like being in season.
Yes.
Um, but it's also like super fun for me, like being able to see people eat what I create and like enjoy it. Like it really brings me a lot of fulfillment. And like if anybody has ever watched me watch someone eat one of my cookies, like I literally like I find so much joy in it. And so that's something I'm working on now is kind of like streamlining it a little bit because I am doing it like on my own and it's definitely a lot. Um, but it's been super fun, and I actually have a booth this weekend that I've been preparing for through all this like hurricane craziness. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm focusing on now is like, not only the competitor stuff, but like the things that I enjoy outside of that.
So awesome. What is it that you want like or work? I guess I should, okay, there's a few things going through my head. One, what do you want to have your cookie company turn into, to are you serving pumpkin treats at this upcoming weekend show?
Oh my gosh.
Because I've seen your cookie creations, and I remember seeing one that was pumpkin, like, oh my God, it looked amazing. And then, yeah, 3, how could someone order?
Okay, so I guess I don't have like, I don't want to say like I don't have goals for it to be like this huge thing, but I don't want it to get to a point where I'm not enjoying it, or I feel like it's becoming too big for just me. And I don't even want to say like it like I don't want to not say it could get to that point, but I'm being realistic because that's just me solely doing it by myself right now. So like right now, like I want to streamline it a little bit, expand it a little bit. So like I am working like on a website. Like when I tell you it's small, it's pretty small, but in Orlando, like I'm becoming more well known, like obviously going to shows, and like my team is like, I feel like my team is about like 200 to 250 athletes in total. So like a lot of my customers come from them, and then that is expanded and then that is expanded. So like pretty much every single show, like I'm getting people asking for like cookies and ordering and like all of that. And it's been super fun. And so like I want it to be like expanded from where I am now, but I guess a lifelong goal would maybe be to like open up a storefront in like the next few years, like something small, not anything crazy, like, but like if it had a future of something bigger, like I'd be open to it. But for now, I'm kind of trying to keep it a little bit smaller just because of the fact that like being one person, there's only so much you can do without needing to like hire help and like all of that. And like my main focus is my competitor, you know, life and what that looks like. And so like in order for that to grow, one of them would have to like take a back seat, but I'm not willing for bodybuilding to take a back seat. So I'm doing this on like a smaller basis.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, and it's something that I really enjoy outside of bodybuilding because again, like I don't want bodybuilding to be like the only part of me. I want to make sure that I'm like fulfilling other aspects of my life, and I have a lot of creative energy that I want to like put out. And so this fulfills that. And
Absolutely.
to answer your question, yes, I have pumpkin treats.
Yeah.
And so my first pumpkin treat of this season is actually a pumpkin cinnamon toast crunch cookie.
Mm,
And I'm so excited about it because I love pumpkin and I love cinnamon toast crunch. So it's going to be really good.
love
And
that.
your third question was, I don't remember what was your.
How do they order?
Oh, so right now, I'm not taking orders until after October 1st because I'm solely preparing for this huge booth that I'm doing. Because the show that it's for is a bigger show here in Florida. So I'm like solely working on it through there. And then because of the size of this, it's very small. I've only been taking orders through like DM and like word of mouth and stuff like that. But I do have a website created that will be um like published soon, which I'm super excited about that. Um, so yeah, it's very new. It's not like new here in Orlando, but it's new like I guess going out to the world and like talking about it through like a podcast and stuff.
Well, by the time this podcast gets released, maybe you'll have your website. So if that does happen, just send it to me and I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, final question is, what is your best advice for someone who has never competed before but would like to? And then your best advice for someone on their road to pro?
So my best advice for like a new competitor would be to make sure that you at least have like a baseline experience with like dieting or tracking macros or like training in a gym, because I do find that like there have been girls who come to me that have no experience in any of those aspects, but they have an interest in competing, which is perfectly okay to have an interest in it. But I definitely tell them to kind of take a couple months to like get into a routine of like dieting and exercising to see if they enjoy that aspect of it, because obviously that turns into like the whole of it. Um, but also the people that are experienced in those aspects to like think about what they're doing it for. So like, are you doing it to like what we talked about? Are you doing it to prove yourself to others, to prove yourself to prove yourself to anything? Or are you doing it to prove something to yourself? Like, are you doing it because you're passionate about this? Are you doing it because it's a genuine interest? Or are you doing it to prove to others that you're capable of something? Because ultimately, like what we talked about before, like you're going to get to the destination fulfilled or unfulfilled. So that's why I want to make sure that like I honestly give like a real raw answer to people when they ask me my advice, because I find that I'm so passionate about it. Like it's so serious and it can get muddy very quickly if your mind isn't in the right spot.
So true.
And then I guess my biggest advice for people on the road to pro, and this I feel like might be controversial, but I'm gonna say it anyway. So I, as an IFBB pro, I have never won an overall ever. Like I've never won an overall at any amateur show, and there's things that I've seen where like, oh, like if you've never gotten an overall at like an amateur show, like you should never go to a national show. And there have been points in my prep where like I've seen that in like coaching captions or like stories that people post where it's like they're trying to like minimize the amount of competitors that go to a national show because they've never gotten an overall or like maybe a first place. And like I am a competitor here telling you that if you fit the criteria of what a professional should look like, compete your little heart out. Like you I hate the limitations that people put on competitors in that aspect, because like I've never won an overall and I was able to achieve my pro card because I wasn't competing to get an overall. I was competing to fit the criteria. And I achieved that. I fit the criteria for what they were looking for at junior nationals, and I was able to get my pro card. So if you're a competitor that keeps missing the shot at an overall, it does not mean that you are not ready. It just means that at that amateur show, you could have very well looked too good, or there was just another girl that they liked better. But it doesn't mean that you're not good enough to go pro. So that's like something I definitely wanted to talk about, because there was a lot of points in my prep where I was like, dang, like I can't get the overall. I'm one off. I've been one off of the overall, like I want to say more than 5 times. And that got in my head a little bit. I was like, if I can't get an overall at an amateur show, like what makes me feel like I can get my pro card? And so like I proved that wrong. So like if there are people out there that like they're competing and they're not going to nationals because they feel like, well, if I don't get an overall, if I don't get first place, like what makes me think that I can get to that level? Where I'm telling you that that's wrong, and to shift your mindset, because as long as you are working to fit the criteria and not working to get an overall or first place, like you will get there.
Love that. Really appreciate you sharing that perspective too, because I know that's a big thing competitors doubt or think that is necessary. So I love that you were able to provide that. And I want everyone to be able to thank you for this episode, connect with you moving forward, maybe expand on the conversation even more, and of course tag you and let you know how much they appreciated it or message you. So how can people connect with you?
So I guess Instagram would probably be the best way. I'm not really on TikTok or anything like that. I've tried it and I just cannot do it with TikTok. But I guess my @ is okbecs on Instagram.
Awesome. I'm going to put that in the show notes page along with your cookie Instagram. And if you have your website up and running by then, I'll put that there too. So you guys, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. If you're listening first thing on Friday, it'll be at the top of the page. If you're listening in the future, just scroll down to the category section. It's alphabetized there. And you'll be able to not just find the links and ways to connect, but also a full breakdown of the episode timestamps, summary of the topics covered. So you can go back and refer to all of this as well, or let your friends and teammates know why they got to listen to it. And Rebecca, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I mean, this was just so fulfilling for me. And I hope that you know what an impact this is going to make on people.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm happy to like I honestly love doing this. Like I'm happy that you invited me on.
Me too. I'm so glad. And I hope that all of you listening have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world where you're listening to this episode. Make it awesome.